The Moors murders were a series of child killings committed by Ian Brady and Myra Hindley in and around Manchester, England, between July 1963 and October 1965. The victims were 5 children aged between 10 and 17, at least 4 of whom were sexually assaulted. The bodies of 2 of the victims were discovered in 1965 in graves dug on Saddleworth Moor. A third grave was discovered there in 1987, more than 20 years after Brady and Hindley's trial. Bennett's body is also thought to be buried there, but despite repeated searches it remains undiscovered. The pair were charged only for the murders of Kilbride, Downey and Evans, and received life sentences under a whole life tariff. The investigation was reopened in 1985 after Brady was reported as having confessed to the murders of Red and Bennett. Hindley stopped claiming her innocence in 1987 and confessed to all of the murders. After confessing to these additional murders, Brady and Hindley were taken separately to Saddleworth Moor to assist in the search for the graves. Characterized by the press as the most evil woman in Britain, Hindley made several appeals against her life sentence, claiming she was a reformed woman and no longer a danger to society, but was never released. She died in 2002 in West Suffolk Hospital, aged 60, after serving 36 years in prison. Brady was diagnosed as a psychopath in 1985 and confined in the high-security Ashworth Hospital. He made it clear that he wished to never be released and repeatedly asked to be allowed to die. He died in 2017 at Ashworth, aged 79, having served 51 years. The murders were the result of what Malcolm McCulloch, professor of forensic psychiatry at Cardiff University, described as a concatenation of circumstances. The trial judge, Justice Fenton Atkinson, described Brady and Hindley in his closing remarks as the sadistic killers of the utmost depravity. Ian Brady was born in the Gorbals area of Glasgow as Ian Duncan Stewart on the 2nd of January 1938 to Margaret Peggy Stewart, an unmarried tea-room waitress. The identity of Brady's father has never been reliably ascertained, although his mother said he was a reporter working for a Glasgow newspaper who died 3 months before Brady was born. Stewart had little support and after a few months was forced to give her son into the care of Mary and John Sloan, a local couple with 4 children of their own. Brady took their family name and became known as Ian Sloan. His mother continued to visit him throughout his childhood. At age 9, Brady visited Loch Lomond with his family, where he reportedly discovered an affinity for the outdoors. A few months later, the family moved to a new council house on an overspill estate at Pollock. Various authors have stated that Brady tortured animals, although he objected to such accusations. It was reported, for example, that Brady boasted of killing his first cat when he was aged just 10, and then went on to burn another cat alive, stone dogs and cut off rabbits' heads. Brady's behavior worsened when he attended Shawlands Academy, a school for above-average pupils. As a teenager, he twice appeared before a juvenile court for housebreaking. Brady left the academy aged 15 and took a job as a tea boy at a Harland and Wolff shipyard in Govan. 9 months later, he began working as a butcher's messenger boy. Brady had a girlfriend, Evelyn Grant, but their relationship ended when he threatened her with a flick knife after she visited a dance with another boy. He again appeared before the court, this time with 9 charges against him, and shortly before his 17th birthday he was placed on probation on condition that he live with his mother. By then, Brady's mother had moved to Manchester and married an Irish fruit merchant named Patrick Brady. Patrick got Ian a job as a fruit porter at Smithfield Market, and Ian took Patrick's surname. Within a year of moving to Manchester, Brady was caught with a sack full of lead seals he had stolen and was trying to smuggle out of the market. He was sent to Strangeways prison for 3 months, as he was still under age 18. Brady was sentenced to 2 years in a borstal for training. After being discovered drunk on alcohol he had brewed, Brady was moved to the much tougher unit in Hull. Released on the 14th of November 1957, Brady returned to Manchester, where he took a laboring job which he hated, and was dismissed from another job in a brewery. Deciding to better himself, he obtained a set of instruction manuals on bookkeeping from a local public library, with which he astonished his parents by studying alone in his room for hours. In January 1959, Brady applied for, and was offered, a clerical job at Millwards Merchandising, a wholesale chemical distribution company based in Gorton. He was regarded by his colleagues as a quiet, punctual, but short-tempered young man. Myra Hindley was born in Crumpsall on the 23rd of July 1940 to parents Nellie and Bob Hindley, and raised in Gorton, then a working-class area of Manchester dominated by Victorian slum housing. Her father was an alcoholic who was frequently violent towards his wife and children. The family home was in poor condition, and Hindley was forced to sleep in a single bed next to her parents' double bed. Their living situation deteriorated further when Hindley's younger sister, Maureen, was born in August 1946. The following year, 5-year-old Myra was sent to live nearby with her grandmother. Hindley's father had served with the Parachute Regiment and was stationed in North Africa, Cyprus and Italy during the Second World War. He had been known as a hard man while in the army, and he expected his daughter to be equally tough. He taught her to fight and insisted that she stick up for herself. When Hindley was aged about 8, a local boy scratched her cheeks. Drawing blood, she burst into tears and ran to her father, who threatened to leather her if she did not retaliate. Hindley found the boy and knocked him down with a series of punches. As she wrote later, "At 8 years old I'd scored my first victory." In June 1957, one of Hindley's closest friends, 13-year-old Michael Higgins, invited Hindley to go swimming with friends at a local disused reservoir, but she instead went out elsewhere with another friend. Higgins drowned in the reservoir, and Hindley, a good swimmer, was deeply upset and blamed herself. She took up a collection for a wreath. His funeral was held at St. Francis's Monastery in Gorton Lane, the monastery where Hindley had been baptized a Catholic as an infant in 1940 had a lasting effect on her. Hindley's father had insisted she have a Catholic baptism. Her mother agreed on the condition that she not be sent to a Catholic school, believing that all the monks taught was the catechism. Hindley was increasingly drawn to the Roman Catholic Church after she started at Ryderbrow Secondary Modern and began taking instruction for formal reception into the church. Soon after Higgins' funeral, she took the confirmation name of Veronica and received her first communion in November 1958. Hindley's first job was as a junior clerk at a local electrical engineering firm. She ran errands, typed, made tea, and was well liked enough that when she lost her first week's wage packet, the other women took up a collection to replace it. At 17, Hindley became engaged after a short courtship but called it off several months later after deciding the young man was immature and unable to provide her with the life she wanted. She took weekly judo lessons at a local school but found partners reluctant to train with her as she was often slow to release her grip. Hindley took a job at Bratby and Hincliffe, an engineering company in Gorton, but was dismissed for absenteeism after 6 months. In January 1961, the 18-year-old Hindley joined Millwards as a typist. She soon became infatuated with Brady. Hindley began a diary and, although she had dates with other men, some of the entries detail her fascination with Brady, to whom she eventually spoke for the first time on the 27th of July. Over the next few months, she continued to make entries but grew increasingly disillusioned with Brady, until the 22nd of December when he asked her on a date to the cinema. Brady and Hindley's dates followed a regular pattern. A trip to the cinema usually to watch an X-rated film, then back to Hindley's house to drink German wine. Brady then gave Hindley reading material, and the pair spent their work lunch breaks reading aloud to one another from accounts of Nazi atrocities. She began to emulate an ideal of Aryan perfection, bleaching her hair blonde and applying thick crimson lipstick. Hindley occasionally expressed concern at some aspects of Brady's character. In a letter to a childhood friend, she mentioned an incident where she had been drugged by Brady but also wrote of her obsession with him. A few months later, she asked her friend to destroy the letter. Hindley began to change her appearance further, wearing clothing considered risque such as high boots, short skirts, and leather jackets. The couple became less sociable to their colleagues. They were regulars at the library, borrowing books on philosophy as well as crime and torture. Although Hindley was not a qualified driver, she passed her test on the 7th of November 1963 after failing 3 times. She often hired a van, in which the couple planned bank robberies. Hindley befriended George Clitheroe, the president of the Cheadle Rifle Club, and on several occasions visited to local shooting ranges. Clitheroe, although puzzled by her interest, arranged for her to buy a .22 rifle from a gun merchant in Manchester. She also asked to join a pistol club, but she was a poor shot and allegedly bad-tempered, so Clitheroe told her that she was unsuitable. She did, however, manage to purchase a Webley .45 into Smith and Wesson .38 from other members of the club. Brady and Hindley's plans for robbery came to nothing, but they became interested in photography. Brady already owned a box Brownie, which he used to take photographs of Hindley and her dog, Puppet, but he upgraded to a more sophisticated model and also purchased lights and darkroom equipment. The pair took photographs of each other that, for the period, would have been considered explicit. For Hindley, this demonstrated a marked change from her earlier, more shy and prudish nature.
Hindley claimed that Brady began to talk about committing the perfect murder in July 1963. By June 1963, Brady had moved in with Hindley at her grandmother's house in Bannock Street, Gordon, and on the 12th of July the two murdered their first victim, 16-year-old Pauline Red. Red had attended school with Hindley's younger sister Maureen, and had also been in a short relationship with David Smith, a local teenager with 3 criminal convictions for minor crimes. Police found nobody who had seen Red immediately before her disappearance. and although the 15-year-old Smith was questioned by police, he was cleared of any involvement in her death. Their next victim, 12-year-old John Kilbride, was lured away from a market in the town of Ashton-under-Lyne on the 23rd of November and murdered on Saddleworth Moor, where his body was buried. A huge search was undertaken, with over 700 statements taken and 500 missing posters printed. 8 days after he failed to return home, 2,000 volunteers scoured waste ground and derelict buildings. Hindley hired a vehicle a week after Kilbride went missing, and again on the 21st of December, apparently to make sure the burial sites at Saddleworth Moor had not been disturbed. In February 1964, she bought a second-hand Austin Traveler, but soon after traded it for a minivan. Keith Bennett, also age 12, disappeared in the Longside district of Manchester on the 16th of June 1964. His stepfather, Jimmy Johnson, became a suspect. In the 2 years following Bennett's disappearance, Johnson was taken for questioning on 4 occasions. Detectives searched under the floorboards of the family home, and on discovering that the houses in the row were connected, extended the search to the entire street. Maureen Hindley married David Smith on the 15th of August 1964. The marriage was hastily arranged and performed at a register office. None of Maureen's relatives attended. Hindley did not approve of the marriage, and her mother was embarrassed, as Maureen was then 7 months pregnant. The newlyweds moved into Smith's father's house. The next day, Brady suggested that the four take a day trip to Windermere. This was the first time Brady and Smith had met properly, and Brady was apparently impressed by Smith's demeanor. The two talked about society, the distribution of wealth, and the possibility of robbing a bank. The young Smith was similarly impressed by Brady, who throughout the day had paid for his food and wine. The trip to the Lake District was the first of many outings. Hindley was apparently jealous of their friendship but became closer to her sister. In 1964, Hindley, her grandmother and Brady were rehoused as part of the post-war slum clearances in Manchester, relocating to 16 Wardlebrook Avenue in the new Overspill estate of Hattersley, near the Cheshire town of Hyde. Brady and Hindley became friendly with Patricia Hodges, an 11-year-old girl who lived at 12 Wardlebrook Avenue.
Hodges accompanied the couple on their trips to Saddleworth Moor to collect peat, something that many householders on the new estate did to improve the soil in their gardens, which were full of clay and builders' rubble. The couple never harmed Hodges, since she lived only a few doors away, which would have made it easier for police to solve any disappearance early on Boxing Day 1964. Hindley left her grandmother at a relative's house and refused to allow her back to Wardlebrook Avenue that night. That same day, 10-year-old Leslie and Downey disappeared from a fun fair in Oncoats. Despite a huge search, she was not found. Her stepfather, Alan West, was treated as a suspect by police and repeatedly questioned over her disappearance, but no evidence was uncovered and the disappearance remained unsolved for nearly a year. The following day, Hindley brought her grandmother back home. By February 1965, Hodges had stopped visiting Wardlebrook Avenue, but Smith was still a regular visitor. Brady gave Smith books to read, and the two discussed robbery and murder. On Hindley's 23rd birthday in July 1965, her sister and brother-in-law, who had until then been living with relatives, were rehoused in Underwood Court, a new multi-story block of flats not far from Wardlebrook Avenue. The two couples began to see each other more regularly, but usually only on Brady's terms. During the 1990s, Hindley claimed that she took part in the killings only because Brady had drugged her, was blackmailing her with pornographic pictures he had taken of her, and had threatened to kill more. After the murder of Evans, Smith agreed to return the following morning with his dead daughter's pram, to transport the body to the car before disposing of it on Saddleworth Moor. He arrived home around 3:00 a.m. and asked his wife to make a cup of tea, which he drank before vomiting and telling her what he had witnessed. At 6:10 a.m., having waited for daylight and armed himself with a screwdriver and bread knife, in case Brady was planning to intercept him, Smith called police from a phone box on the estate. He was picked up by a police car from the phone box and taken to Hyde Police Station, where he told officers what he had witnessed the previous night. Police Superintendent Bob Talbot of the Stalybridge Police Division went to Wardlebrook Avenue, accompanied by a detective sergeant. Wearing a bread deliveryman's overall on top of his uniform, he asked Hindley at the back door if her husband was home. When she denied that she had a husband or that a man was in the house, Talbot identified himself. Hindley led him into the living room, where Brady was lying on a divan, writing to his employer about his ankle injury.
Talbot explained that he was investigating an act of violence involving guns that was reported to have taken place the previous evening. Hindley denied there had been any violence and allowed police to look around the house. When police asked for the key to the locked spare bedroom, she said it was at her workplace, but after police offered to take her to retrieve it, Brady told her to hand it over. Evan's body was discovered in the bedroom, and Brady was arrested on suspicion of murder. As Brady was getting dressed, he said, "Eddie and I had a row and the situation got out of hand." Though Hindley was not initially arrested, she demanded to go with Brady to the police station, taking her dog. She refused to make any statement about Evan's death beyond claiming it had been an accident, and was allowed to go home on the condition that she return the next day. Over the next 4 days, Hindley visited her employer and asked to be dismissed so that she would be eligible for unemployment benefits. On one of these occasions, she found an envelope belonging to Brady, which she burned in an ashtray. She claimed she did not open it but believed it contained plans for bank robberies. In the meantime, the police were uncovering more evidence and became convinced that Hindley was actively involved in the murder of Evans and other possible victims. On the 11th of October, she too was arrested and taken into custody. She was charged as an accessory to the murder of Evans and remanded at Risley Prison. Police searching the house at Wardlebrook Avenue found an old exercise book with the name John Kilbride, which made them suspect that Brady and Hindley had been involved in the unsolved disappearances of other children and teenagers. Brady told police that he and Evans had fought, but insisted that he and Smith had murdered Evans and that Hindley had only done what she had been told. Smith said that Brady had asked him to return anything incriminating, such as dodgy books, which Brady then packed into suitcases. He had no idea what else the suitcases contained or where they might be, though he mentioned that Brady had a thing about railway stations. A search of left luggage offices turned up the suitcases at Manchester Central Railway Station on the 15th of October. The claim ticket was later found in Hindley's prayer book. Inside one of the cases were, among an assortment of costumes, notes, photographs and negatives, 9 pornographic photographs of a young girl, soon identified as Downey, naked and with a scarf tied across her mouth, and a 16-minute audio tape recording of a girl identifying herself as Leslie in Weston screaming, crying and pleading to be allowed to return home to her mother.
Downey's mother was asked by police to look at the 2 photographs which were deemed appropriate in order to identify her daughter, and also identified the voice from the recording, too, was of her daughter. Officers making inquiries at neighboring houses spoke to Hodges, who had on several occasions been taken to Saddleworth Moor by Brady and Hindley, and was able to point out their favorite sites along the A635 road. Police immediately began to search the area, and on the 16th of October found an arm bone protruding from the peat, which was presumed at first to be that of Kilbride, but which the next day was identified as that of Downey, whose body was still visually identifiable. Her mother was able to identify the clothing, which had also been buried in the grave. Also among the photographs in the suitcase were a number of scenes of the moors. Smith had told police that Brady had boasted of photographic proof of multiple murders, and officers, struck by Brady's decision to remove the apparently innocent landscapes from the house, appealed to locals for assistance finding locations to match the photographs. On the 21st of October, they found the badly decomposed body of Kilbride, which his mother had to identify by clothing. That same day, already being held for the murder of Evans, Brady and Hindley appeared at Hyde Magistrates Court charged with Downey's murder. Each was brought before the court separately and remanded into custody for a week. They made a 2-minute appearance on the 28th of October and were again remanded into custody. The investigating officers suspected Brady and Hindley of murdering other missing children and teenagers who had disappeared from areas in and around Manchester over the previous few years, and the search continued for a while after the discovery of Kilbride's body. But with winter setting in, it was called off in November. Various newspapers were also keen to name possible further victims of the Moors murders, with Red and Bennett being 2 of them. Presented with the evidence of the tape recording, Brady admitted to taking the photographs of Downey, but insisted that she had been brought to Wardlebrook Avenue by the men who had subsequently taken her away again, alive. By the 2nd of December, Brady had been charged with the murders of Kilbride, Downey and Evans. Hindley had been charged with the murders of Downey and Evans, and being an accessory to the murder of Kilbride. At the committal hearing on the 6th of December, Brady was charged with the murders of Evans, Kilbride, and Downey, and Hindley with the murders of Evans and Downey, as well as with harboring Brady in the knowledge that he had killed Kilbride. The prosecution's opening statement was held in chambers rather than in open court, and the defense asked for a similar stipulation, but was refused. The proceedings continued before 3 magistrates in Hyde over an 11-day period during December, at the end of which the pair were committed for trial at Chester Assizes. Many of the photographs taken by Brady and Hindley on the moor featured Hindley's dog Puppet, sometimes as a puppy. To help date the photos, detectives had a veterinary surgeon examine the dog to determine his age. The examination required a general anesthetic from which Puppet did not recover. Hindley was furious and accused the police of murdering the dog, one of the few occasions detectives witnessed any emotional response from her. The 14-day trial began in a specially prepared courtroom at Chester on the 19th of April 1966. The dock was fitted with bulletproof glass to protect Brady and Hindley because it was feared that someone might try to kill them, such was the public outrage at the crimes. Other elaborate security precautions included a public address system costing £2,500 and £500 worth of telephone equipment. Brady and Hindley were charged with murdering Evans, Downey, and Kilbride. Both Brady and Hindley entered pleas of not guilty. Brady testified for over 8 hours. Hindley for 6. Brady admitted to striking Evans with the axe, but claimed that someone else had killed Evans, pointing to the pathologist's statement that his death had been accelerated by strangulation. Brady's undisguised arrogance did not endear him to the jury, and neither did his pedantry, wrote Duncan Staff. Hindley denied any knowledge that the photographs of Saddleworth Moor found by police had been taken near the graves of their victims. Following his conviction, Brady was moved to HM Prison Durham, where he asked to live in solitary confinement. He spent 19 years in mainstream prisons before being diagnosed as a psychopath in November 1985 and sent to the high-security Park Lane Hospital. He made it clear that he never wanted to be released. Hindley lodged an unsuccessful appeal against her conviction immediately after the trial. She corresponded with Brady by letter until 1971. When she ended their relationship, Hindley was told that she should spend 25 years in prison before being considered for parole. But in January 1985, the Home Secretary increased her tariff to 30 years.